In this video, I'm going to explain the construction steps in facing a waist of a pair of Edwardian men's trousers that are high-waisted. This is a pair of regular trousers where the waistband is cut separately and seamed on, a set-on waistband. You can tell the stripes go the different way on the different grains. The Hollywood waist is cut all in one to a high-waisted line, and that's where the facing happens. So let's look inside a pair of high-waisted trousers with a Hollywood waist, and you can see that the facing is cut in a mirror image to the shape of the trouser, and it is interfaced here. We'll go into that in a little more detail. And it clean finishes the top of the back pockets and the top of the fly. It would have a more clean finished appearance if you actually match the serging thread color to the garment. I recommend that. Here are the pattern pieces for the trouser front. This is where the zipper fly goes in. Side seam pockets go here. Here is that back hip pocket, and here's the center back J-curve here. There's a side back dart that shapes the waist because hips are generally larger than the waist. We nip this in here a bit, we nip it in here, and then the top of the trouser flares out so that it starts to go up over the torso, up over the rib cage. So that's why this flares here and that dart tapers to nothing here. In creating the pattern piece for the waistband facing for the front, we want to mirror the front shape and then have an extension here so that we can clean finish the top edge of that zip fly underlap, the extension that we stitch in when we construct the zipper fly. We want to just add that to the facing. If we find we don't need it later, we can always trim it away, but it's much harder to weave fabric back on. So for the back facing, we want to do the same thing. We want to create a mirror image of the trouser. However, to reduce bulk, we want to trace off that dart, but then we want to pinch that dart out so that we're not actually cutting that and stitching that. It's not a real alteration spot, and so you wouldn't actually need to have that dart in the facing. Eliminating the dart in the facing reduces bulk, and that's a desirable thing. Whatever seam allowance you cut at center back for alterability, you'll want to cut also in the facing so that you can alter these trousers in the future. So here we have the pattern pieces for the front facing with its underlap and the back facing with the dart pinched out. And I see in this particular sample that they didn't pinch out the dart, they stitched it in. That's all right. So what you'd want to cut are two fronts, two backs out of whatever fabric is the facing itself. And then you'd want to, with the same seam allowance at center back for alterability as you've stitched into the, built into the trousers. And then you'll want to cut an inner facing. And I like to use the fusible acro. It's nice and firm, it holds up well after dry cleaning. And I like to cut that without seam allowance so that we're not carrying that into the seam, which causes a bulky seam. So cut your facing pieces, your fusible acro, fuse that onto your facing, then construct, stitch the side seam. If you do have the dart, go ahead and stitch the dart. There again, they cut the fusible acro out of the dart, which I think is a great thing. They did not carry the fusible acro into the seam allowance of the side seam. That's terrific, reduces bulk there. Leaving the center back seam open for 6 or 8 inches will facilitate the next step. Stitch the facing to the top of your trouser from center front or through the edge of the extension to center front, through center back. Remember, we've left center back on the trouser open. Stitch the facing on the other side from center front to center back. We're going to be stitching through center back at the very last. This provides an alterability, ease of alterability later. Once you have the facing stitched to the trousers, you want to trim, clip, grade, and understitch that so that the facing will roll nicely to the inside and won't peek out in any way to the audience. Once you have that understitched on each side, then finally you stitch the center back seam up through the facing, press that open, flip the facing down, and clean finish the inside of the trouser. So once you have the facing stitched on, trimmed, clipped, graded that seam, understitched, pressed down flat, then stitch a line of top stitching through all the layers, about 2.5 or so inches down, all the way around the waist, on the actual waistline, to clean finish and hold the facing down. And that's the finished look.